Rain tapped gently against the windows as Mia sat curled in her reading nook, surrounded by notebooks filled with her poetry. Each one represented years of her life, thoughts and emotions captured in carefully chosen words that rarely saw the light of day. The weathered spines and dog-eared pages told their own story of a passion pursued in moments stolen between the responsibilities of daily life. As she traced her fingers over a line she'd written that morning, footsteps approached from the hallway. David's shadow fell across her work, and without thinking, Mia quietly closed her notebook. It was an instinct now, this protective gesture. Their eyes met briefly, his distracted, hers guarded. He asked about dinner plans while checking his phone, not noticing how she tucked the notebook beneath a cushion. The weight of unsaid words hung in the air between them, as tangible as the rain against the glass. They had been married for 8 years, but Mia sometimes wondered if David had ever truly seen her. Not the wife who managed their home and supported his academic career, but the woman who woke before dawn to write poems about the ache of being invisible in your own life. That night, as David slept, Mia returned to her nook and opened her notebook again, writing by the dim light of her phone, afraid that turning on a lamp might wake him, might invite questions or, worse, dismissal. The dinner party had been David's idea, colleagues from the university English department gathering at their home. Mia had spent the day preparing, not just the food but herself, rehearsing how she might engage in the literary discussions that would inevitably unfold. When Professor Harding asked what everyone was working on, the table erupted with talk of research papers and upcoming publications. In a rare moment of courage, during a brief lull, Mia mentioned her poetry anthology project. I've been compiling works about liminal spaces, those moments between what we present and what we feel. 6 faces turned toward her with polite interest, but it was David's reaction that cut deepest. He laughed, a bit too loudly. My wife and her little poems, he said, reaching for his wine glass. She's quite the hobbyist. Others joined in with polite chuckling, and the conversation quickly pivoted to a colleague's forthcoming book on modern American literature. The camera of memory would forever catch Mia's face in that moment. Not anger, but something deeper, more profound. Recognition. This wasn't new. This dismissal had happened countless times before, but somehow seeing it performed for an audience crystallized something within her. She excused herself, disappeared into the kitchen, and returned minutes later with dessert, smiling as if nothing had happened. But something had shifted inside her, a small, significant tectonic movement of the soul. The microaggressions accumulated like dust on a forgotten bookshelf. Monday. David moved her notebooks from the coffee table to make room for his stack of student essays, relegating her words to a drawer without comment. Tuesday, she began describing a dream that had inspired a new poem at breakfast, only to have him interrupt mid-sentence to discuss the department meeting he was dreading. Wednesday, he completely forgot about the literary event she'd mentioned twice that week, leaving her to attend alone while he worked late. By Thursday, Mia started rising at 5 a.m., writing in the blue darkness before dawn while David slept. These early morning hours became sacred, the only time her thoughts weren't competing with his presence. She began hiding her newest works in places he never looked, between cookbooks, in her winter boot box, behind framed photos of their wedding day. The irony wasn't lost on her that the man she had promised to share her life with was the person she most needed to hide from. Sometimes, catching her reflection in the bathroom mirror, Mia hardly recognized herself. This woman with secrets tucked in every corner of their home, this woman who had become a ghost in her own marriage, appearing fully only in the words she wrote when no one was watching. Yet in those early morning hours, something was growing stronger within her, not just her writing, but her resolve. The first message from Rebecca appeared while David's phone charged on the kitchen counter. Mia hadn't meant to see it, she wasn't the type to snoop, but the notification flashed just as she set down his coffee. Looking forward to our lunch tomorrow. Same place? Mia felt something cold slide down her spine, but she said nothing. Instead, she began watching more carefully, noting his later returns from campus, the distracted way he responded to her questions, how often his phone now remained in his pocket rather than on countertops or tables. When the faculty spring dinner arrived, she finally met Rebecca Chambers, the new department administrative director. Tall, confidently stylish, with a laugh that commanded attention. "I've heard so much about you," Rebecca said, though something in her tone suggested otherwise. Throughout the evening, Mia observed their interactions, the inside jokes, the way Rebecca's hand lingered on David's arm when she emphasized a point, how his eyes followed her across the room. "She's very practical," David commented on the drive home. "Knows exactly what she wants and goes after it." The word practical hung in the air between them. Later that night, Mia wrote a poem titled Practical Woman, about a life measured in efficiency rather than feeling, and wondered when practicality had become more valuable than passion. 3 weeks after meeting Rebecca, Mia made a decision that felt both brave and foolish. She had completed a series of poems. Her best work, she thought, exploring the quiet dissolution of intimacy. With hands that trembled slightly, she printed the collection and left it on David's desk with a simple note, "I'd value your thoughts." It was an offering of vulnerability, a bridge extended across the growing chasm between them. She imagined him reading her words, finally seeing the depth of her inner world. The next day, returning from grocery shopping, she found her pages moved aside, partially covered by bills and department memos. That evening, she finally asked, "Did you have a chance to read what I left you?" David looked up from his laptop, a flicker of guilt crossing his face as memory returned. "Honestly, Mia," he said, his voice gentle but dismissive, "don't you think it's time for something more substantial? Poetry doesn't pay bills." The camera of memory lingered on her face as she absorbed this final judgment, this confirmation of her irrelevance to the man whose opinion had once mattered most. She simply nodded, gathered her pages from his desk, and walked away. That night, she sat alone in her reading nook until dawn, not writing, just breathing through the pain of being so thoroughly unseen. Tuesday afternoon found Mia returning home early from a dentist appointment, the house unusually quiet as she entered. Halfway up the stairs, she froze at the sound coming from their bedroom, the unmistakable zip of luggage. No dramatic confrontation awaited her, no heated argument or passionate pleas. Just the quiet devastation of a decision already made. David stood beside 2 packed suitcases, his expression a mixture of relief and discomfort at being caught. "I was going to call you," he said, as if this somehow softened the moment. Mia leaned against the doorframe, suddenly understanding that she had been preparing for this moment for months. Maybe years. "Rebecca," she said simply. Not a question. "She understands the real world," he explained, not unkindly. "We want the same things." The unspoken implication hung heavy. Mia, with her poetry and dreams, lived elsewhere, in a world of impractical beauty and emotion. As a parting gesture of what he probably considered generosity, he told her she could keep the house to write in. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Mia stood perfectly still in their now half-empty bedroom, listening to the sound of his car starting, then fading away. The house felt cavernous in the days that followed. Mia wandered through rooms that seemed to echo with absence, touching spaces where David's things used to be. The empty bookshelf, the bare nightstand, the hook by the door where his keys once hung. She noticed what he'd chosen to take and what he'd left behind, each decision a final statement about what he valued. In the back of their shared closet, she discovered her box of notebooks, dozens of them, filled with years of her writing, too impractical to take, too insignificant to even mention leaving behind. She carried the box to the living room and sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounding herself with her words, the only things he didn't value enough to either take or destroy. As evening fell and the room darkened around her, Mia realized she was crying. Not for the loss of David, but for the years she had spent making herself smaller to accommodate his dismissal. She picked up each notebook, feeling their weight, remembering when she'd written each piece. There was an unexpected comfort in these bound pages. They were wholly hers, untouched by his judgment. In them she had always been fully present, even when she was disappearing in her marriage. 6 months passed, each day a deliberate step away from the life she had known. Mia established new routines in the house that was now truly hers. She no longer wrote in hidden corners or pre-dawn darkness. Her laptop claimed the center of the kitchen table, her notebooks spread openly across the coffee table and nightstand. One rainy afternoon, scrolling through literary websites, she discovered an online self-publishing platform. The idea took root immediately, not with grand ambitions or fantasies of success, but with the simple desire to release her words from the confines of her notebooks, to give them air and light. She selected poems written during the final year of her marriage, arranged them into a collection, and titled it simply, Things Left Behind. With trembling hands, she uploaded the manuscript, designed a minimal cover, and pressed publish. The platform informed her the collection would be available within 48 hours. That night, she slept more soundly than she had in years, as if the act of sharing her work had released something long held tight within her chest. 3 weeks after publishing, while sipping her morning coffee, Mia's phone pinged with a notification. Someone had tagged her in a social media post. Curious, she opened the link to find a literature blog featuring a glowing review of her collection. Mia Chen's poetry cuts to the bone of modern relationships, exposing the exquisite pain of being unseen by those closest to us. It read. She read the review 3 times, hardly believing the words applied to her work. 2 days later, another review appeared, then another. Small but meaningful sales followed. Her phone began pinging more frequently with notifications, comments, shares, messages from readers. A week later, she received her first fan letter from a college student who wrote that her poem Practical Magic had given her the courage to leave an emotionally abusive relationship. You put into words what I couldn't explain to anyone else, the young woman wrote. Mia printed this email and pinned it above her desk, a reminder that her little poems could echo in someone else's life. The irony wasn't lost on her. What David had dismissed as insubstantial was now taking substantial form in the world without him. The email from Poetics Quarterly arrived on a Tuesday morning. Mia read it twice, confirming it wasn't spam. A prestigious online literary journal wanted to interview her about her growing influence in contemporary poetry circles. She sat at her computer the following day, facing the interviewer on a video call, carefully considering each response. The questions were thoughtful, treating her work with a seriousness that still felt unfamiliar. When asked about her inspiration, she simply said, "I write about the silence between what we say and what we mean, about how we negotiate that gap." The interviewer noted themes of invisibility and rediscovery in her work, asking if these reflected personal experience. Mia smiled, neither confirming nor denying. All writing is personal, she replied. But not all of it is autobiographical. She made no mention of David. Her success would not be framed by her pain. The interview published a week later, bringing another wave of readers to her work. That evening, sitting in her reading nook, now reimagined with new cushions and better lighting, Mia realized she had reclaimed not just her space, but her voice. And people were listening. The email arrived on an ordinary Wednesday, the kind of day where nothing remarkable was supposed to happen. Mia almost missed it, nearly sending it to spam before recognizing the publisher's name, Meridian House, one of the most respected literary publishers in the country. She opened it with cautious curiosity, then froze. They had discovered her work through Poetics Quarterly and were interested in publishing a proper collection of her poetry. They proposed an advance, editorial support, and a small promotional tour. The figure they mentioned would cover a year of her expenses. Mia sat staring at the screen, completely still, as tears streamed down her face. She thought of David's dismissive words, "Poetry doesn't pay bills." Yet here was evidence to the contrary. Her phone rang, her sister calling about weekend plans, but Mia couldn't bring herself to answer, couldn't yet form words around this moment. Instead, she printed the email, folded it carefully, and placed it in her current notebook. Tangible proof that her impractical passion had, against all expectations, crossed into the practical world. That night, she wrote a new poem titled Advance, not about money, but about moving forward while carrying your past like a map of where not to return. Mia's first public reading was scheduled at a local independent bookstore, a modest venue that typically hosted local authors and small literary events. She expected perhaps a dozen attendees, friends, fellow writers from her newly joined online communities, maybe a few curious regulars from the bookstore. She arrived 30 minutes early to find a line stretching down the block. The manager escorted her through the side entrance, explaining they had rearranged the space to accommodate the crowd, but it would still be standing room only. Backstage, Mia's hands shook as she reviewed her selected poems. The trembling continued as she was introduced and walked to the podium. Faces, so many faces, turned expectantly toward her. She opened her book, took a deep breath, and began reading words David had once dismissed as inconsequential. Her voice grew stronger with each line, each stanza met with attentive silence, punctuated by occasional murmurs of recognition. When she finished her set, the applause was thunderous. For nearly an hour afterward, she signed books and spoke with readers. A young woman approached last, eyes rimmed with tears. "You wrote my heart," she said simply, pressing Mia's hands between her own. Driving home, Mia realized that for the first time in her public life, she had been fully, completely herself, and had been embraced for exactly that. Practical Magic, Mia's first properly published collection, hit bestseller lists 3 weeks after release. What began as literary recognition was expanding beyond traditional poetry circles. A video of her reading the title poem at a Chicago bookstore went viral, 2 million views in a week. Interview requests flooded her inbox, literary podcasts, culture magazines, even a national morning show. Her publisher, sensing opportunity, pushed for an expanded tour. Cities were added, venues upgraded. Mia found herself in a whirlwind of attention she had never imagined or sought. Amidst the praise came the inevitable backlash. A literary critic from The Atlantic wrote a scathing review, calling her work domestic drivel dressed in literary clothing, and questioning her sudden popularity as emotion substituting for craft. The byline caught her attention immediately. Dr. James Harrington, a former colleague of David's, someone who had sat at their dinner table years before, chuckling politely at David's dismissal of her little poems. The critique stung, reopening wounds she thought had healed. That night in her hotel room, Mia wrote a new poem titled Critical Theory, exploring how easily judgment flows from those who create nothing themselves. She didn't publish it. Some words were still just for her. The Portland Literary Festival was the final stop on Mia's extended tour. She had grown more comfortable with public readings, had developed a rhythm to her presentations, learned to gauge audience reactions, and adjust accordingly. Midway through her reading of Abandoned Objects, a poem about rebirth after abandonment, she spotted him, David, sitting 7 rows back, his expression unreadable in the dimmed auditorium. Their eyes met briefly. Mia felt a momentary falter in her rhythm, then steadied herself and continued, her voice perhaps stronger than before. After the event, during the signing portion, she sensed his approach before seeing him. He stood awkwardly at the edge of her table after the line had dwindled. "You've done well," he said, a statement that seemed to cost him something to deliver. Mia noticed slight changes in him, new glasses, a bit more gray at his temples. "Thank you," she replied politely, neither cold nor inviting. He lingered, perhaps waiting for more questions about his life, perhaps, or expressions of gratitude for the freedom his departure had granted her. Instead, she turned to greet an approaching group of graduate students who had been waiting respectfully nearby. She didn't look back to see if he stayed or left. His presence, once so defining, had become peripheral to her story. The email from Professor Elaine Winters arrived on a Tuesday morning. "I'm writing to inform you that I've added your collection Practical Magic to our Contemporary American Poetry syllabus for the coming semester. Your exploration of domestic power dynamics and feminine reclamation of voice represents an important perspective in modern literature." Mia felt a surge of pride. Her words would be studied, analyzed, discussed in academic settings. She wrote a gracious reply, offering to video conference with the class if scheduling permitted. Curious about Professor Winters, Mia looked her up online, discovering she taught at Bay Area University. Only when scrolling through the English department faculty did Mia make the connection. This was the same university where David now served as associate professor. A quick check of Professor Winters' course schedule confirmed that her Contemporary American Poetry class was a required course for all English majors. Mia's words would echo in halls where David walked, would be discussed in department meetings he attended. She hadn't planned this quiet infiltration, this peaceful reclaiming of space in the academic world that had once made her feel so small. Yet there was undeniable poetry in the symmetry of it all. The handwritten letter arrived in Mia's mailbox on a sunny Thursday afternoon, the handwriting on the envelope youthful but deliberate. The return address showed a campus box number at Bay Area University. Inside, elegant stationery held 3 pages of thoughtful analysis of her poetry, focusing particularly on themes of authentic self-discovery in practical magic. The letter was intelligent, insightful, clearly written by someone with genuine appreciation for literary craft. "Your work found me at exactly the right moment," the closing paragraph read. "When you write about reclaiming silenced parts of yourself, I feel as though you're speaking directly to my experience." Only when Mia reached the signature did she realize Lily Parker, David's daughter with Rebecca, now 18 and apparently a freshman at the university where her father taught. Mia sat perfectly still on her porch steps, letter in hand, memories flooding back. She had met Lily only once, when the girl was 7, at a department holiday party shortly before she and David married. Now this young woman, on the cusp of adulthood, had found her way to Mia's words without knowing their connection. The universe, it seemed, had a flair for narrative irony. The lecture hall at Bay Area University was larger than Mia had expected. Professor Winters had invited her as a guest lecturer for the contemporary poetry seminar, and despite initial hesitation, Mia had accepted. In the front row sat Lily Parker, eager, bright-eyed, her notebook open and ready. Their eyes met, and Lily smiled with genuine admiration, unaware of the complex emotions her presence stirred. Mia delivered her lecture on vulnerability as strength in contemporary women's poetry, carefully avoiding any personal references that might reveal their connection. After class, as students gathered to ask questions and request signatures, Lily waited patiently until the crowd thinned. "Your letter was beautifully written," Mia said when they finally stood face to face. Lily beamed. "I've been following your work since Professor Winters introduced it." Then I realized, she hesitated. "I didn't know about the connection between you and my father until recently. Mom mentioned it when I wouldn't stop talking about your book." She looked down briefly, then met Mia's eyes with striking directness. "Your words made me feel understood in ways nothing else has. Especially now, trying to figure out who I am apart from my parents' expectations." The irony wasn't lost on Mia that her words, born from the pain of David's dismissal, had now reached his daughter in her own journey toward self-definition. "That's the greatest gift a writer can receive," Mia replied softly, meaning every word. The Pulitzer nomination for Mia's third collection, Visible Woman, came as a genuine shock. Her publisher called personally to deliver the news, his voice betraying more excitement than her own stunned silence. Media coverage intensified immediately, profile requests from major publications, television appearances, speaking invitations from universities across the country. In an interview with The New Yorker, the journalist asked about her journey from self-published poet to literary phenomenon. For the first time publicly, Mia briefly acknowledged, "Someone once told me poetry doesn't pay bills. That may be true, but it saved my life." The quote went viral, appearing on literary social media accounts, printed on tote bags, shared in creative writing classrooms. Mia watched this happening with a mixture of amusement and discomfort. She hadn't named David, had no interest in public revenge or shaming. Yet there was power in acknowledging that pivotal dismissal, in recognizing how thoroughly she had proven it wrong. That evening, she received a text from Lily, "Saw your interview. Proud to know you." The simple message brought unexpected tears. Whatever complicated feelings she harbored about David and their past, this connection with his daughter felt like a kind of healing neither of them had sought but both somehow needed. The email from Lily was both exciting and anxiety-provoking. "I'd be honored if you would attend my senior thesis presentation next Friday. It's an analysis of recurring themes in your work, specifically the transformation of silence into language and action. Dad will be there. Department policy for faculty children's presentations. But this means a lot to me." Mia deliberated for days before responding with a simple, "I'll be there." The following Friday, she slipped into the back row of the classroom just as Lily was being introduced. David sat near the front, his back to Mia. For 45 minutes, she watched as this brilliant young woman eloquently dissected her poetry, drawing connections between works from different collections, identifying patterns even Mia hadn't consciously recognized. Chen's work demonstrates how creative expression can transform personal erasure into powerful presence, Lily concluded. Her journey from silence to acclaimed voice mirrors the journey many women must take to claim their rightful space in both private and public spheres. Throughout the presentation, Mia observed David growing increasingly uncomfortable as his daughter quoted from poems clearly inspired by their marriage, poems that laid bare the quiet devastation of being dismissed by someone who claimed to love you. When Lily received her expected grade and enthusiastic faculty feedback, Mia felt a complex pride for this remarkable young woman, but also for her younger self who had refused to remain silenced. After the presentation, students and faculty filtered out of the classroom. Mia remained seated, watching as David approached his daughter with a hug that seemed both proud and slightly strained. When the room had nearly emptied, he finally turned and saw Mia. Something passed across his face, recognition, perhaps, of all that had transpired in the years between them. He approached slowly, Lily following with curious eyes. "Your work is extraordinary," he said simply. "I never understood." "I see it now." The words hung between them, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement. Mia simply smiled, not with malice but with peace. Some people aren't meant to understand each other's languages. In that moment, she realized she had stopped needing his validation years ago, had stopped measuring her worth through his eyes. Lily joined them, bright with admiration for Mia, seemingly oblivious to the complex current running between the adults. She clutched a leather-bound notebook to her chest, much like Mia's own notebooks from years before. As David watched, Mia gently asked, "May I read some of yours?" Lily's face lit up as she handed over her words without hesitation, without the fear of dismissal that had once been Mia's constant companion. In that simple gesture, Mia saw the completion of a circle. Her silenced ink had flowed into power, and now she could ensure another woman's voice would never be mocked into smallness. And for Mia, that was the greatest success of all. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share with friends who need to hear this story, and comment below with what part of Mia's journey resonated most with you. What would you have done in her situation?